Oklahoma is my home. This is where I was born and raised. It was here where I was given a chance at life, being conceived after my mother was violated at the age of 16. This is where I received my education and learned with hard work, discipline, and courage anything was possible. But things have changed. This is not the Oklahoma I remember. Over the last several years, I've seen fear, chaos, and division tear this nation apart through the efforts of communists and the apathy of Republicans in name only, who are either incapable or unwilling to do whatever it takes to protect our God-given rights. Election fraud, open borders, riots, unvetted Afghan refugees, and 300,000 plus acres of land sold to Chinese nationals has made Oklahoma the hub for human trafficking, the indoctrination of our children in critical race theory, sexual immorality, and abortion on demand. And finally, the unconstitutional and illegal vaccine mandate, leaving hundreds of thousands of our legal and law-abiding citizens jobless. Enough is enough, and the political theater must stop. We must have a governor who's willing to lead legislators and Oklahomans to fight back against this tyranny and aggressively address these issues head-on. As the next governor of the state of Oklahoma, I will, in the first 100 days, initiate a forensic audit with canvases to ensure election integrity, secure Oklahoma's borders, stop all state funding to school districts who train or teach CRT to faculty, staff, or students, and end all abortions. Oklahoma, let's put our faith back in God, believe that nothing is impossible, and make Oklahoma free again. Oklahoma is my home. This is where I was born and raised. It was here where I was given a chance at life, being conceived after my mother was violated at the age of 16. This is where I received my education and learned with hard work, discipline, and courage anything was possible. But things have changed. This is not the Oklahoma I remember. Over the last several years, I've seen fear, chaos, and division tear this nation apart through the efforts of communists and the apathy of Republicans in name only, who are either incapable or unwilling to do whatever it takes to protect our God-given rights. Election fraud, open borders, riots, unvetted Afghan refugees, and 300,000 plus acres of land sold to Chinese nationals has made Oklahoma the hub for human trafficking, the indoctrination of our children in critical race theory, sexual immorality, and abortion on demand. And finally, the unconstitutional and illegal vaccine mandate, leaving hundreds of thousands of our legal and law-abiding citizens jobless. Enough is enough, and the political theater must stop. We must have a governor who's willing to lead legislators and Oklahomans to fight back against this tyranny and aggressively address these issues head-on. As the next governor of the state of Oklahoma, I will, in the first 100 days, initiate a forensic audit with canvases to ensure election integrity, secure Oklahoma's borders, stop all state funding to school districts who train or teach CRT to faculty, staff, or students, and end all abortions. Oklahoma, let's put our faith back in God, believe that nothing is impossible, and make Oklahoma free again. Oklahoma is my home. This is where I was born and raised. It was here where I was given a chance at life, being conceived after my mother was violated at the age of 16. This is where I received my education and learned with hard work, discipline, and courage anything was possible. But things have changed. This is not the Oklahoma I remember. Over the last several years, I've seen fear, chaos, and division tear this nation apart through the efforts of communists and the apathy of Republicans in name only, who are either incapable or unwilling to do whatever it takes to protect our God-given rights. Election fraud, open borders, riots, unvetted Afghan refugees, and 300,000 plus acres of land sold to Chinese nationals has made Oklahoma the hub for human trafficking, the indoctrination of our children in critical race theory, sexual immorality, and abortion on demand. And finally, the unconstitutional and illegal vaccine mandate, leaving hundreds of thousands of our legal and law-abiding citizens jobless. Enough is enough, and the political theater must stop. We must have a governor who's willing to lead legislators and Oklahomans to fight back against this tyranny and aggressively address these issues head-on. As the next governor of the state of Oklahoma, I will, in the first 100 days, initiate a forensic audit with canvases to ensure election integrity, secure Oklahoma. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of my wife, Dr. Michelle, and I, welcome to another virtual town hall. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Sherwood, as you know, and we are gaining a lot of momentum. We have an exciting, amazing town hall planned tonight with two great guests, and we have had a lot of historical things happen in the past that I'll catch you up on briefly. We have a lot of historical things coming in the future that I'll catch you up on briefly in just a moment. We have been traveling around this state, and one of the most amazing, beautiful, awesome things that I've seen is the eyes and the hearts of patriots that honor God, that understand the Constitution and know it needs to be protected, and that just love people. And it has been so infectious. Wherever we go, whatever we do, and whatever we say, when we look people in the eye and connect with them, and you know that when we look at you, we want you to understand you're the most important person in our lives right now. And that love has been infectious. We have seen our volunteer base grow. We have seen the polls change. We have seen a movement and a momentum around this state that is unsurpassed. They said we couldn't do it, but folks, we're going to do it, and we are doing it, and we will do it. And that's the way it is when we have these moments like we're in right now, where this Red Sea has to part, where we have literal tyranny chasing us down, trying to devour us and consume us, one bite of our rights at a time. And folks, we're at a time right now like no time ever in history, in the last 200 years at least, to where we have to take back our freedom. We must not expect it to be given back. We have to take it back. And our patriot guests tonight will ensure that we understand that that resonates loud and clear. Now, a little bit of past history, what's happened in the last several days. We've traveled miles back and forth across the state. We've been to the northwest part of the state, the southwest part of the state, the central part of the state, the eastern part of the state, and the northeastern part of the state. And everywhere we went, people are excited. They are pumped up, and they are psyched. We've yielded a lot of results in this and built a lot of incredible lifelong relationships that we promise to covet, cherish, and honor. Not just pre-election, not just campaign, but post-election, after inauguration. We're going to keep those relationships alive. We have several big events coming up this next week, and I want to keep you apprised of those with our app. You can see on the front of the app, it says, "Never bow down to tyrants, defy them." And this app has a lot of information on it. So if you want to know where we stand on something, all you have to do is go to the issues section, and it's populated right here for you. If you want to know where we're going to be, you can go to the events section, and we've got all kinds of things happening. So a lot of things. Oklahoma, in Laverne, Oklahoma, at the Harper County 2A meeting. So if you live out in northwestern Oklahoma, anywhere near there, I want you to get out there. Wednesday, we'll be in Norman, Oklahoma, for a rally that's generated to give information to the residents of Norman, Oklahoma, about the horrific situation involving the OTA, the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. If you're interested in coming to that, you just need to show up, get on our app, you'll find out where it is. We have literally hundreds of people dedicated to attend so that their voices can be heard. We have a great lineup of speakers, including Dr. James Taylor and Senator Warren Hamilton. They will be there in person, and they will speak along with 4 or 5 other great candidates as well. So I want you to be there for that. On Thursday night, we'll be in Owasso at No Limits Church, again with 3 or 4 other candidates, having a meet and greet candidate forum. I want you to be there. Coming up, big event in June, on June 11th, the singing artist Billy Falcon will be in Tulsa. He is the one that sings many songs that are very patriotic. Never Surrender is what he's known for. He acts as a songwriter for John Bon Jovi, so he's well known in the music circles. He's going to be doing a concert and a patriotic event on behalf of our campaign, and it's going to be amazing. That's June 11th in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But many events here, and sometimes I lose track of them all because it seems like it's literally every night. You can see they go on and on and on. So find an event, participate. And tonight, just to remind you, I want you to follow along on our Facebook Live. I'm going to be monitoring the questions that are coming in. There's already several of you that are on the virtual town hall tonight. So I'll be monitoring the questions. So make sure you ask the questions. of our great guest tonight, and we'll do our best to get those things answered in lifetime. If we don't get them answered in lifetime, we'll get them answered after we're dismissed from time tonight. So tonight, as we go through here, make sure you share the feed in all of your circles, because people need information. You cannot make good decisions unless you have good information. And good information must be seasoned with wisdom. So run it through the proper filters, the proper channels, and make sure that your good information is used properly, because correct use of information, again, is wisdom. Incorrect use of information is called foolishness. So we'll make sure we use our information right. And tonight's going to be chock full of information. Now, with that said, I want to get to my first guest tonight. My first guest, I got to know him probably 2.5, 3 years ago. And we became instant friends because we had a common bond. The common bond is we both love God. We both want to protect this Constitution, and we love people. Now, our guest is the host. He's actually a well-known media personality for the Great Patriot Network, Conservative Daily. I've been on there several times myself. Just a great, amazing man. And I want to welcome to the virtual town hall my friend, and I'm honored to call him friend, Joe Oltmann. Joe, welcome, man. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Mark, thanks for having me. I mean, not literally having me, but having me on the show.
You're awesome, man. Well, look, a lot of times as I've got to know you, you've been a speaker on the Reawaken America tour many, many times.
I have.
And you have a unique background. Why don't you tell the listeners tonight and viewers about your background, first of all?
Well, I mean, I'm a failed businessman. I mean, I'll start there. I was a great entrepreneur. I thought I was the cat's meow. Then 2007 happened. That happened to a lot of people. 2007, 2008 happened. And, that humbled me quite a bit. And so I went and spent some time in the Middle East and Africa helping people. I did that for about 6 years. And then I became a tech CEO and started a company 10 years ago that a little over 10 years ago that turned out to be one of the largest first-party data aggregators in the nation. So I was a tech CEO, built up a really, really big business, and found myself getting involved in this election fraud and helping people in their communities quite by accident. Nothing's by accident. I mean, I think it happens because God wants to put you on a different path. But I joke that it was by accident. Like, tripped, fell over, and found myself looking around going, hey, let's take this path.
Well, I've watched you and I've listened to you, and I've, of course, talked to you many, many times in person and certainly in interviews. But Joe, talk a little bit about this idea of election. And I want to get, two answers, because two answers to two questions. And there's people out there right now, as I set up these questions, that either A, believe that elections were stolen, B, believe they weren't, or C, don't know, and are kind of dance back and forth. And I want to address all of them tonight. But the two questions I have for you, and I want you to explain it, is, were elections stolen? And the second question is, how were they stolen, where people can understand it?
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest problem. I think that when people put their head in the sand, they don't want to see it. It's because knowing you can't ever look backwards. You can't unsee it once you see it. And so our society allows for you to look at things and to make a judgment call based on what football team you want to play for a variety of reasons. But if you're going to ask me if the election was stolen, the answer to that question is absolutely 100%. The election was stolen. It wasn't that there was fraud in the election and that it may have had an impact. It 100% had an impact. It 100% changed the direction and the velocity of our nation. And you don't have to look very far in order to understand what happened, but you do have to look just below the surface to get through the misinformation, disinformation, and all the campaigns that they're building all over the nation to say there's nothing to see here. So I just want to take you back in time, if I can, and tell you just a little bit about election fraud. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. It's the concept of the con, right? Small cons and big cons. Now, the big con, in order to pull that off, in order to end chaos, to pull that off, you have to have the small cons. I mean, they've done movies about this for decades, right? So you have to keep people distracted with one thing while something bigger is happening. And so we've seen evidence of, and they've tried to explain it away, of election fraud in the machines. And if you go back to Antrim County, which was the first time we got access to and did an image of the Dominion voting system, you were able to dig in and look at it. And the ASOG report was written. It said 100% these machines are designed to defraud the American voter. That was the conclusion that they came from with getting into the system from day one. Now, what happened with the establishment is they came in and said, oh, they misunderstood the system configuration. They don't have election voting experience. So as a tech CEO, I'm going to tell you that system architecture is designed to take a pathway. And that pathway is really actually simple. Everything is very simple. When you put something into a system, if then it has to come out and it has to come to some sort of conclusion. Mm-hmm. Well, the same thing happens in voting machines. Your job is to take votes, count them, tally them for each candidate, and then out the bottom comes this candidate got X number of votes, this candidate got X number of votes. So what we found inside the system is that that they had developed systems in order to stop you from getting access to or have transparency in that voting process. And then when you get one step further, there's a thing about system architecture. And I'm trying to keep this as high level as possible so that anyone can understand it, is that you have these things called logs. And logs inside of a computer allow for you to see if anybody interferes with, if there's separate systems or databases or other ancillary parts of that system that could create a different outcome than what the ballots are in the system. And in every instance that we've looked at where we've gotten access to the image of the machine, all of the logs, not one log, not two logs, but all of the logs were either deleted or the system capture on that log was set at such a low standard that it was overriding itself over time. The danger to that is that it doesn't allow you to see who was in the system, what was done in the system, how the conclusion came about. It's like this. I take water, I pour it into it, and out the bottom comes motor oil. And there's like, hey, listen, we turned water into motor oil. Well, you know that that's not possible. But the system that they're saying is you have to trust that I can turn water into motor oil. And I know that's a crude example, but that's in essence what they did. And then you could say, well, Joe, they counted the votes down in Maricopa County. And this is where the media told a story, and what was really in the law, what was really in the 4 volumes of information that came out were diametrically opposed. They said that all of the ballots were counted and that Biden won the votes. Well, it wasn't a recount, it was an audit. Now, what they didn't tell you, what you didn't have access to in that environment, was the fact that every single one of the ballot boxes was open and compromised and mixed with other ballots from other precincts. Now, that is not standard in the industry. That's not standard in voting. Those boxes, when the ballots are put in, are sealed. They're sealed in case they ever have to be audited. And they use the thing called risk limiting audit. In essence, they let the system choose the ballots that they go and pull to make sure those ballots align with who those people voted for.
Like a random sampling or something.
Random sampling, yeah. Okay. But when you get down into it, Mark, and this is what everyone needs to understand, nobody's ever slowed down long enough to look at it and go, all right, let's just simplify it. But they wouldn't let anybody do a paper analysis. And you'd say, well, paper analysis, I mean, come on, this kind of a kooky deal. It's really just simple. How many different sources did the paper come from, and how much of that source came from different paper manufacturers? It's simple because that will actually tell you whether or not Runbeck, which is I believe complicit in the behavior with Dominion specifically, they have to print paper with certain sources. There's certain paper manufacturers that they have. Well, if these ballots were reproduced or they were rescanned or just copied, you would know that right away by what paper was used in that environment. You'd be able to trace it back. It's like having a signature. And paper has the same sort of signature. There's certain chemicals that are used in each piece of paper. Like it or not, paper is traceable. They would say it's not traceable. It is absolutely traceable. But they wouldn't let that happen. And as you get further down the line, you start talking about those logs. Imagine writing on a board, and then behind you, the actual image of that was erased as you wrote on it. It'd be as if it never happened. Now, these are all things in system architecture. And by the way, I have friends that are very, very liberal. And I've sat down with them and I'm like, and they're like, Joe, the election wasn't stolen. I was like, all right, are you ready? I'll put $1,000 on the table. I will put $1,000 on the table if I can't show you the evidence that says that the election was stolen. I even had a friend say, not 1,000, Joe. I'm gonna put your money where your mouth is, $5,000. I'm like, all right, done. And I walked away with $5,000. I did. He didn't walk away with $5,000. I walked away with $5,000. And this is someone that fundamentally just hates politics, but is more progressive in his views. And what he said at the end is, Joe, I can't unsee it. So all the conversations I have now with people are afraid to have these debates with me because I can show you in the evidence how the election was stolen. And when you have mail-in ballots, there is no chain of custody. When you have mail-in ballots, there is a ability to actually manufacture those ballots and put them in the system, and that's what they did. Go ahead.
You say manufacture ballots. You're talking about copying ballots, I'm assuming.
Or just manufacturing them through the system. The system has the ability to reproduce phantom ballots.
Okay, got it.
It can literally produce a ballot out of thin air. It can create a ballot in the system. And as you go down the list, there's been all these breaking news out of Georgia. Ballots are filled out by the computer, and they were able to prove it. And they said, oh, well, those are ADAs.
ADAs, what is that?
The Association for, it's a Disabilities Act. So the Disability Act for handicap. But the number of ballots was never re-challenged. And because we couldn't get access to the system and they resisted us doing these audits, why would you resist doing an audit? If you have nothing to hide, you open the books and be transparent with the American people. Over 60% of the people in this country believe that the election was stolen. The other 40% are made up of the people that are complicit, the people that just don't want to look into it, don't want to do the hard work. It's a lot of research. It's a lot of time. And at the end of the day, I was a tech CEO. I was a 2-time Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year nominee. I was a finalist in 2020. And they literally said, if you'll stay out of this, Joe, you will win this award. Sell your company for hundreds of millions of dollars. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't step away from it. And by God's grace, he put me in the middle of a call with a guy named Eric Coomer. And I didn't even know what I was looking at then. And now I'm under constant attack that somewhere along the line, I made this up for advertising clicks. It has cost me tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. It has cost me my position in the community, which I was on multiple boards and doing things for the most disadvantaged among us. I had literally everything in the world pointed in a direction where it would have made no difference to me had an election been stolen for the next 30 years. And yet I was the one that was called a conspiracy theorist, and that somewhere along the line, I made this story up. I've had death threats. I have bulletproof glass in my house. I have thermal cameras on my home. I've had personal security detail for 18 months. And now I'm a podcaster. And I've been relegated to a different environment where I have to throw away my passion, all because I think God puts you on a path and you stay on that path. It has nothing to do with wanting to do advertising revenue. I didn't need to have anything to do with this. And if it wasn't for my friend dying in March of 2020, long before the election, and then manipulating people into this pandemic, which you call it a pandemic, people did die. Yeah. But there were ways to save lives. Mark, you do this. This is what you do. You save people's lives related to COVID-19. And I felt that they had literally manipulated and killed small businesses across the nation, nearly 20% in an 8-month period of time. And I just, I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stomach it. So I got involved in handing back power to the small to medium businesses, which is why I was there to begin with. I was in this Reopen Colorado movement that I started back in March.
Well, I've watched you, Joe, and I can tell the viewers right now that everything you're saying is true, because I've met some of your team, and I have a relationship with them well. And I've watched you go out there on a limb many times, and I've talked to you many times too in the middle of the storms that you were going through at those times. And tell you, my hearts went out to you, man. But I honor you for your courage, tenacity, and the way you explained it tonight is good. So let me just make sure that I've got it so that people understand. So in any system, you got an input, throughput, and output, right? Mm-hmm. So you put something in, it's kind of got this if then, kind of this flow chart analyses, but within the system, there's ways to manipulate that in the system. So it might not be a straight line linear just equation like you put in this ballot, it equals this. And so the logs are there to be able to track if there's any manipulation from the outside in. So you have two things going on right there. You have the input, throughput, output thing that could be manipulated. And then you've got the outside interference that, based upon the logs being deleted, is not trackable, traceable, observable. And then you've got the idea on the outside of just being able to print ballots. Right? Did I catch all that? Am I close?
You don't even have to print them. You just have to make sure the votes are tallied through the adjudication process. Look, here's the thing, is that the system is designed with so many holes that they can say that if anything goes wrong, they'll just blame it on outside influence. China got into it or Russia got into it. I mean, we've seen this constant kind of misdirection and chaos that they create. But when I built the system architecture back in December of 2020, after I got sued by Eric Coomer of Dominion Voting System, I was sure that this is how they stole the election. And to this day, from December 2020 to today, because frankly, that is more fulfilling, and that's something that people can have a hard time taking shots at you. So when you step out in a very unpopular environment and say, look, I was able to tie CITL, the ERIC system, Dominion voting systems, all the stuff that's done with voter logs and making sure that they had poll books so they had access to voters. I tied it back to how the system went down and went back up, and not just swing states, but in multiple states. The Edison zero, where they zeroed out votes, all at the same time, systematically across all 50 states. And then when they came up, there was a variance of nearly 4.4%. I mean, we were able to look at PID function and have mathematicians like Draza Smith and Dr. Frank and others that were able to go in and say, this is how they did it. I was able to go back and look at Eric Coomer's doctorate thesis and look at the fact that he uses decay models as a part of his thesis and say, well, look, if I'm a mathematician, these are the things that I would do. I mean, nothing adds up in what they're doing. And we have massive amounts of proof, especially out of Mesa County and the stuff that Mike Lindell's been doing. And by the way, if you think Mike Lindell is crazy, then why would a guy either? Not even convinced, but curious. Why are they not curious as to the election fraud and the things that are happening within our election systems?
Well, at least tonight, my hope and prayer is that through this, at minimum, everybody that's listening, everybody that gets the access live or later in this video will be curious. And curiosity is the originator of truth, isn't it?
Right.
You have to
Absolutely.
seek truth, ask why not, why not? And Joe, yeah, a couple minutes left here before we sign off and go to our next guest. Basically, what's the answers here? What do we do?
Well, we pray. We pray. I mean, the first thing we have to do is that we disallowed God in our community. We allowed for them to basically take over our education system. And when I mean them, I mean satanic influences. And if you're not a believer, I would say hedge your bets, because you cannot explain away all the things that are happening in our communities. So the first thing we have to do is we have to pray. Pray if you're in a good place, pray if you're not in a good place. Make sure you thank God, invite him back into our community, and then stand steadfast with people shoulder to shoulder that are in your community, and just have a conversation. Start with a conversation and start getting people like you, Mark. Let's start getting people like you elected to office who are unselfishly serving the people of their community and of their state. And by doing that, And then by forcing those candidates to come back to the community and say, what do you need? And when they go back to office, they have to walk right past all of the political PACs. They have to walk past the lobbyists, and they have to go do the work of their constituents. The people in our country have been left behind. And when I mean left behind, it does not mean that they just don't have a voice. They've been left behind to the point where they've become slaves in their environment. They are no longer free. And you could argue we have some freedom. Well, you have a freedom to walk to the bathroom. You have a freedom to go to the grocery store. But do you have true freedom? Do you have the ability to express free thought? And if you did, why would they continually tell you what you think and then attack anyone, i.e. Elon Musk, every time somebody stands up and says, hey, listen, this doesn't make sense to me? They become the enemy, and they use those same tactics over and over and over again against those people. That should show you what we're dealing with, good versus evil. And so we have to get good people in office, and we have to eradicate and cut out this cancer that has permeated every part of our government. It's compromised every branch, and the judiciary is one of the worst.
Wow. I hope everybody now is stunned with what you shared, Joe Oltmann. And where can people reach you, by the way? I want to make sure we get a plug for that.
Well, you can go to Conservative Daily Podcast. We're everywhere. So Conservative Daily Podcast is at conservative-daily.com. We've got lots of stuff out there. I do get a little bit fiery. I end every podcast with a prayer.
Yeah.
It's the way we do things. And but we talk about truth, a lot of truth. And sometimes I get really fired up. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're pretty much everywhere. But if you want the video version, and then just to plug out to Mike Lindell and the guys over at Lindell TV, we're on Lindell TV live every single day at 10 a.m. Mountain Time and 4 p.m. Mountain Time, Monday through Friday. And so you can go over there as well. And Mark, we'll have you on the show here in the next little bit too. And as a last say, Mark Sherwood for governor of Oklahoma. You shouldn't want Mark, you need Mark, because he'll stand up courageously, and he'll do everything that he says he's going to do and more to protect the people of Oklahoma.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thanks for being my friend most of all, and I honor you, and folks support Joe Oltmann. So Joe, thanks. Make sure you in the feed, everyone, tell Joe thank you, and I'll make sure he gets all those kind messages. So Joe, I'll be talking to you soon and seeing you live.
Sure.
Man. Well, folks, I appreciate you listening. So in a good way, because sometimes it takes a boom to make some noise. Now, with that said, I'll introduce our next guest tonight. I met our next guest, John, probably about going on about 10 months ago or so. And he is a man of great knowledge. He's been involved in Oklahoma politics for a number of years in many, many positions. He's of Oklahomans United for Life. And I am honored to call him a